Oh, start that up again because I pushed a button. And so this one's connecting through Wi-Fi. Everything's run by my tablet. So once I fire up the machine, you hear the fan kicking up. Fluid NC is the board itself. Go through and it'll connect. Then once it's there, everything is an HTML style dashboard. Looks just like this. So now we're connected. So again, the very first thing you want to do whenever you fire up is actually home the machine. So that then it will move left. Get that X coordinate. It'll know where the X0 is. And then it'll move down, which will be setting the Y coordinate. And it doesn't move fast when you're doing this, so you can actually manually move it closer. I just left it alone. It doesn't really bother me to wait an extra few seconds. Okay, so now it knows where the home position is. It knows the tool is in home position. This in relation to where I'm actually going to be working on this piece here doesn't matter. It just needs to know where it's actually at. Now if you look here, those are the coordinates. So that bottom, all those zeros there, tells you that that position, X, Y, and Z, as far as the height that the tool is all set to 0 right now. In relation to where it moved negative 317, it moved on the X coordinate, on the Y, negative 318, and then it moved 29 on the Z, moving up. So to go from this point to actually working, you have a few more steps to do. So you want to now set the origin for your cut, because everything is done based on where that origin is. So last night you saw that we stand in the way that the machine works, because this is our X, this is our Y. So a lot of people, again, they origin at the bottom left piece or bottom left corner of their material. I'm going to origin in the middle. That's how I set all my software up, all my cuts set up. So what you can do, you can't move it by hand at this point without turning off the stepper motors. And if you do that, then it's going to lose where it's at, because it has to be able to count the steps to keep track of where it actually is. So if you turn off the stepper motors and move it, you get to start all over again. So I set my origin. I've actually had a laser sight. Little crosshair. So I set mine, and again, if you don't have that, which lots of people don't, you just set the tool bit in the center of where you want your origin to be. And then you will zero everything out, and then it knows where it's at. So right now, my crosshairs look like they're about in the middle, which you'll see there's a difference between the crosshairs and the tool bits, because my laser is here, my tool is over there. I've got it set up through macro, the single button push. Takes and moves it, because I've measured and I know the difference between here and here, so it will move that bit to directly onto where that laser itself actually was. Now you turn the laser off, and then you can see the overall numbers right there. You want to then zero everything out. So everything now zeros. So origin wise, again, machine knows this is 0, and now the origin for the cut, this is now 0. So we've got our X and our Y set up. Now we got to set the Z, because we're doing everything by depth. We have to tell the machine where is the surface of this. And there's different ways to set Z. Some people will surface or set their Z based on the table height, so they'll measure it to there. And you just have to set it up that way in the software when you generate your G-code, so it knows that you're measuring from here, not from here. Everything I'm doing, we're going to be measuring right from the surface of the board itself. So 2 different ways to do it, depending on how your machine is set up. A lot of people will take a piece of notebook paper, rest on this, move it by software, because you can actually control the Z, just like you control the X and the Y through here. This is your height. Move it down to the point that it's just barely touching, so you have some friction through there. And then you will set the Z the same way we set the X and the Y, and tell it that's where the 0 is. And then you can raise it up, then you can move it, and it knows that unless you turn the machine off, that's where you're going to be starting everything from. I use a probe, which is this little piece of metal here. All this is doing, I'll move that down a little bit so that's on a flat spot. So all this is doing is you have to make sure you connect this, because this is completing a circuit. When I tell it to probe, it's going to come down here, it's going to touch this. This is wired all the way back to the board, obviously. And as soon as it touches, it knows that's where the surface is. And it also knows by software that this block is 15 millimeters thick. So it's going to actually set the 0 to that height minus 15 millimeters, and now we are at the board. When it's all done with that, it's going to then raise up 1 millimeter so that there's enough room for the tool to move and be able to pull the block out. So on mine, bring up the probe, start probe, and you'll see it go down and touch. Yes, that moves out of the way. So you see that little touch and it bounce back, and then this can come out. We don't need that anymore. You definitely don't want to start out the router with it attached. And if you look, my Z position is now 16 millimeters. So that's 15 millimeter for the block, 1 millimeter to go up. After that, we've got our X, our Y, and our Z. Even though I move this, it remembers exactly where that 0, 0 point is, so everything's going to index that no matter where I run this machine on the table. That point is 0, 0 until I tell it otherwise. If you have dust collection, you've been to this stage at this point, now is when you want to attach that. If you don't have it, you don't need to worry about it. I've done a ton of cuts without dust collection. It just takes a little bit of extra cleanup. But set that up. Set that up, and then I like to put a little rubber band on mine just to make sure that everything kind of stays together. It's hard to do left-handed. So physically, the machine is now set up to cut. My router is turned on physically. My dust collection's turned on. Everything is controlled by the software on mine. I've got a relay underneath the table basically that through G-code, it tells it turn on, closes it, then everything powers up and it will just start cutting all by itself. Once I do that, it's going to get noisy in here, so I'm not going to do it till the absolute last second here. Then, so physically we're ready to go. Software-wise, we want to actually upload a file. So the Jackpot board runs kind of like a 3D printer. Yours may be running that if you're hooked into a computer, feeds every line of G-code to it. The old X-Carve that I was using before, that's the way that it was. Everything was actually run by the computer. It controlled everything. So it fed every single line of G-code, kept track of everything. It was actually pretty nice. The Jackpot board runs kind of like a 3D printer, whereas I'm going to load the file from this, which is my kind of go-between, because I do my design work on the computer in my house, put onto this, bring it out here, hook it up, and then everything will feed to it. I mean, these are all the different files and cuts I've cut in the past. And test cut is the one that we just did last night. Tracks G-code, this just says idle because nothing's going on right now. So anyway, once I hit start on this, that little play basically button, it's going to start feeding the board. It just tells the board to start feeding G-code to it, and at that point the board takes over and it's going to control everything. So we'll be able to see on the screen what's actually going on. We can track the G-code, we can flip to a couple different screens, but I can also disconnect the tablet entirely, turn it off, because now the board itself is running everything. As long as I'm not seeing anything go wrong with it, it will take care of everything. If anything goes wrong and I do disconnect it, my only option is to shut down the entire machine versus being able to leave it connected. I can hit pause, I can do a couple resets, I can do stuff with that still being connected. But at this point, physically we're good to go. Software wise, we're good to go. So if we want to, we can actually press play, let it start to cut. I'm just going to let it fire off for a couple of seconds here. It's going to get noisy. And again, we're just cutting scraps, so it's not like we're really doing anything important here. And then as soon as I'm done with this, this is getting thrown away. So Once I do this, the vacuum should kick on, the router should kick on, we'll wait a couple seconds, and then everything should start moving. And just like that, and you can see I wasn't actually clamped down everything, so it's moving it around a little bit while it cuts. But that's pretty much it. So when everything is set up correctly, you build your software, you build your G-code, you get it loaded, you hit play. Again, you make sure everything's clamped down and not just sitting on top of your spoil board so that it doesn't move around. In the end, you should have the piece that you're actually looking to cut. And it can be simple, it can be pretty complex. I mean, this one, obviously, we were just making a few little funky cuts. I wasn't really doing anything important, but the result should be the same. And you should end up with, you know, this is obviously more complex than what we're just doing. That's all done with the V-carve, but the same general process, except I did the generation on V-carve Pro instead of using SLCam. But it just generates the G-code, load it onto the board, and then the board just starts feeding directions. There's a couple files you run to get to the plaque stage for the V-carve because you have a bit change in the middle of it and everything else. But that should get you to the point that you can actually create the parts that you want. And then after that, it's just a matter of testing out the abilities of the machine and then getting it to the point that you're comfy with it, and then you can become more and more and more elaborate. And there is just a ton of fun stuff and unique stuff that you can do here that by hand, there's people that can do that. I'm not one of them. By hand, there's people that can do that. I could probably do that. And it was all done with an etching bit. And then I spray painted it black and then sanded the entire thing. So got a nice little outline. Anyway, that is the basics. I will try at some point to show how to go from a picture that I downloaded to an actual carvable file. And I will do that later. But I think for now, that gets you, again, to the point that you can actually start making some sawdust. So any questions, let me know. If I can't answer them, there's definitely people on the forums that are, know more about machining than I do and more about the machine than I do, and they can do an even better job. So I'll talk to you later.